The night the sky broke, Aras decided it was probably his fault. Not in any logical, cause-and-effect way, he hadn't personally thrown anything at the atmosphere. But life had trained him to assume responsibility for disasters, especially the dramatic ones. The lights across the street blinked out in a synchronized surrender. Drones froze midair like they'd collectively forgotten their purpose. And somewhere above, something tore through the clouds with a sound that made his bones reconsider their arrangement. He stopped under a flickering street lamp, staring upward. "Okay," he muttered, hands in his pockets. "If that's aliens, I'd like to formally say I'm not interesting enough to abduct." The universe, as usual, did not acknowledge his request. The object, no, not an object, something too deliberate for that, cut across the sky in a jagged descent and vanished behind a row of abandoned buildings. A distant crash followed, the kind that suggested insurance companies would have a nervous breakdown if they knew about it. Aras hesitated. He had a very well-developed instinct for avoiding trouble, refined over years of making questionable life choices and then immediately regretting them. But something pulled at him, a quiet, insistent curiosity that felt suspiciously like a bad idea wearing a convincing disguise. "Just a look," he said to no one, already walking. The alleyways grew darker as he approached, the usual city noise replaced by a low, unnatural hum that seemed to vibrate inside his skull rather than his ears. Debris littered the ground, metal fragments that shimmered faintly, as if undecided about their color. One piece twitched when he stepped near it. Aras froze. "Right," he whispered, "metal that moves, completely normal, definitely staying calm." The crash site revealed itself in fragments. A section of wall had been peeled away like it had offended someone powerful, and at the center lay a twisted structure that pulsed with dim, uneven light. It wasn't smoking, which somehow made it worse. Smoke meant fire. This felt intentional. And then he saw her. She was half hidden beneath a slab of broken concrete, her body still except for a faint rise and fall that he almost missed. At first glance, she looked like a woman, human enough to fool the part of his brain that preferred simple explanations. Then she shifted slightly, and the illusion cracked. Her ears were long, elegant, tapering back in a way no human anatomy book would approve of. A soft glow pulsed beneath her skin, faint but steady, like she carried a distant star inside her. Aras stared for a full 5 seconds, which he felt was a reasonable amount of time to question reality. "Nope," he said finally, rubbing his face. "Nope, I'm going home, I'm going to sleep, and tomorrow this will be a very creative hallucination." She made a small sound, barely audible, but it cut through his denial with surgical precision. He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Of course you're alive. Why wouldn't you be alive?" Stepping closer, he crouched beside her, carefully lifting the edge of the concrete. It was heavier than expected, but adrenaline, or poor decision-making, pushed him through. As he freed her, her hand instinctively caught his jacket, fingers tightening with surprising strength. "Great," he murmured. "You don't even know me and you already trust me. That makes one of us." Her skin was warm, warmer than it should have been, and the faint light beneath it flickered unevenly. Up close, she looked fragile in a way that made his chest tighten, though he couldn't explain why. He hesitated only a moment before sliding one arm beneath her and lifting her carefully. Somewhere behind him, the hum shifted, sharpened. Aras didn't turn around. "That," he said under his breath, adjusting his grip as he stood, "is the sound of me leaving immediately." He took one step, then another, the weight in his arms both unfamiliar and strangely grounding. The alley seemed longer now, stretching out in quiet resistance, and the air felt charged, as if watching him. "You know," he muttered, glancing down at her unconscious face, "I had plans tonight. Nothing important, just not this." The hum grew louder, closer. "Okay," he added, quickening his pace, "new plan. Survive first, complain later." Aras did not remember deciding where to go, only that his feet had chosen for him long before his thoughts caught up. By the time he reached his apartment, his arms were shaking, and his breath had turned into something between a complaint and a protest. He kicked the door shut behind him, leaning against it for a second, as if expecting the night itself to try and follow. "Good news," he said between breaths, glancing down at the woman in his arms. "You made it. Bad news, my spine did not." He carried her to the couch, carefully lowering her as if she might shatter, though she had just survived something that had demolished half a building. Up close, the glow beneath her skin had dimmed, flickering like a faulty light trying to remember its purpose. Aras hovered for a moment, unsure what to do next, which was a familiar feeling he usually handled by making tea. Right, he said, straightening. Step 1, hot beverage. Step 2, panic. The kettle clicked on, humming in a far more comforting way than whatever had been chasing them. He kept glancing back at her, half expecting her to vanish or transform into something far less human. Instead, she lay still, one hand loosely curled against the fabric of his couch, as if testing its reality. Okay, he continued, pacing slightly. Let's review. You found a glowing woman with long ears in a crash site that definitely wasn't made by anything normal, and instead of calling someone, anyone, you brought her home. He paused, considering. Honestly, that tracks. That's exactly the kind of decision that ruins lives. The kettle clicked off. He poured water into a cup with unnecessary focus, as though precision might restore order to the situation. Behind him, something shifted. Aras froze. Please don't be standing behind me, he said quietly. I feel like that would be very stressful. You are not in immediate danger. The voice was calm, measured, and very much not where he had expected it to be. He turned slowly. She was sitting up now, watching him with an intensity that made him forget the existence of tea entirely. Up close, her eyes carried that same faint glow, though softer, like light filtered through deep water. Her ears twitched slightly, adjusting to sounds he couldn't hear. Good, Aras said after a moment, nodding as if this were a normal exchange. Immediate danger is my least favorite kind. She tilted her head, studying him. You removed me from the crash site. This action increased my survival probability. Great, he replied. Love that for you. There was a pause. Not awkward exactly, just dense. I am attempting gratitude, she added. Aras blinked. You're doing great, very convincing. Her gaze shifted slightly, focusing somewhere just to the side of him. You are experiencing elevated stress. Your heart rate is irregular. Your thoughts are disorganized. He let out a short laugh. That's my natural state, actually. She stood a little unsteady at first, then steadier with each second, as if recalibrating. The glow beneath her skin pulsed once, then settled. Your environment is inefficient, she said, looking around the apartment. But stable. Hey, Aras protested. This is organized chaos. There's a system, I just don't know what it is. Her attention returned to him, sharper now. They will search for me. Of course they will, he muttered. Wouldn't want things to be easy. The entities that pursued me do not abandon objectives. Aras picked up the tea, took a sip, immediately burned his tongue, and decided that was appropriate. Okay, he said, wincing slightly. So, just to clarify, I am now involved in an interstellar problem with persistent enemies. That feels excessive. She stepped closer, her expression unreadable but focused. You chose involvement. I tripped into involvement, he corrected. There's a difference. For a moment, she simply watched him, as if measuring something deeper than his words. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out and lightly touched his sleeve, the same place she had grabbed before. You carried me, she said. Aras shrugged, trying for casual and missing slightly. Yeah, well, you looked like you needed it. Her fingers tightened just a fraction, not enough to trap him, just enough to anchor. Then I will remain. He blinked. Remain. Yes. Aras stared at her for a long second, then let out a slow breath. You know, he said, setting the cup down, I had a very quiet life before tonight. She tilted her head again. Define quiet. He thought about it, then shook his head. You know what? Never mind. It's gone now anyway. The hum returned before the morning did. Aras was halfway through explaining toast to someone who had tried to analyze it as a compressed thermal grain construct, when the lights flickered again, sharper this time, like the city itself was flinching. He froze mid-sentence, bread in hand. Tell me that's just the electricity being dramatic. It is not, she replied calmly. Of course it's not, he sighed, setting the toast down like it had personally betrayed him. Why would anything be simple? She was already standing by the window, her posture different now. Focused, precise, as if every part of her had aligned toward something only she could sense. The faint glow beneath her skin had returned, stronger, steady. Her ears angled slightly, catching signals he couldn't even imagine. They have located me, she said. Aras ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping in front of her. Okay, right, so we run again. I'm getting good at that. Not fast, but committed. She shook her head. Running will not resolve this. Running resolves most of my problems, he muttered. emotionally at least. A low vibration rolled through the walls, subtle but undeniable. Outside, something moved too smooth, too deliberate. Ara's glanced toward the window and immediately looked away. I'm guessing those aren't friendly neighbors. They will not negotiate, she said. They will retrieve. Great, he replied. Love a determined enemy really builds character. She turned to him then, and for the first time, there was something softer in her expression, something almost understanding. You are afraid. Constantly, he admitted. This isn't new. No, she said quietly, not of them. The words landed heavier than the vibration in the walls. Aras opened his mouth to deflect, to joke, to do anything that kept things light and manageable, but nothing came out. Another pulse shook the building. We do not have time for this, he said quickly, gesturing vaguely toward the danger. Can we schedule the emotional breakdown for later? Your burden affects your decisions, she replied. It already has. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, well, my decisions have always been questionable. You should see my past. Actually, don't. I'd prefer if at least one alien in the universe didn't analyze me. She stepped closer, her presence steady, grounding in a way he didn't expect. When you carried me, you did not calculate risk. You acted. That's called panic, he said. That is called choice, she corrected. You chose to help despite fear. Yet with yourself, you choose avoidance. Another tremor. Closer now. Aras swallowed, the familiar weight pressing in, regret, guilt, all the things he kept carefully buried under sarcasm and routine. This is really not the moment, he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. It is the only moment, she said. For a second, everything seemed to narrow, the noise outside, the approaching threat, even the room itself fading behind the quiet intensity of her gaze. She reached out, placing her hand lightly against his chest. Warm, steady. You carry this constantly, she said. Why? He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. Because I didn't fix things when I should have, because I walked away when it mattered, because it's easier to pretend none of it exists than to deal with it. The walls shuddered again, glass cracked somewhere. And has that strategy been effective? She asked. He let out a breath that almost became a laugh. No, not even a little. She nodded once, as if confirming a calculation. Then change it. Outside, something struck the building. Hard, Aras opened his eyes. The fear was still there, but it felt different. Less like something to escape, more like something to move through. He straightened slightly, glancing toward the door, then back at her. Okay, he said. No more running. A faint shift in her expression. Approval maybe. The next moment, the wall across the room tore open with a precise, controlled force. Shapes moved through the breach, sleek and silent, their forms bending light in ways that made them difficult to focus on. Still hate this, Aras muttered, stepping forward anyway. She moved beside him, her glow intensifying, the air around her distorting subtly. When the first of the entities advanced, she lifted her hand, and the space between them seemed to fold, redirecting its movement with impossible grace. Aras blinked. That is extremely useful. Focus, she said. Right, he nodded. Focusing, definitely doing that. The confrontation was brief, but it felt stretched across something larger than time, movements precise, reactions immediate. Aras didn't fully understand what she was doing, only that it worked, that each motion pushed the threat back, unraveling their advantage. And when it ended completely. Silence settled, heavy but no longer threatening. Aras stood there for a moment, breathing hard, then looked around at what remained of his apartment. Well, he said slowly, security deposit is definitely gone. She glanced at him, then at the broken wall, then back. You are concerned about this. I contain multitudes, he replied. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped closer, her glow fading to something softer again. It is over, she said. Aras nodded, though his gaze drifted slightly inward. The weight was still there, but lighter somehow, manageable. You carried me, she added. He met her eyes, a small, genuine smile forming. Yeah, and I carried you, she said. He exhaled, the tension finally easing in a way he hadn't felt in years. Yeah, he repeated. You did. Outside, the sky had begun to clear, the chaos fading into something distant, almost unreal. Aras glanced toward it, then back at her. So, he said, crossing his arms lightly, what now? You disappear into space. I go back to pretending my life is normal. She considered him for a moment. Your life is no longer normal. Great, he said, just what I always wanted. A pause, then unexpectedly he smiled, but maybe that's okay. Morning arrived like it had nothing to apologize for. Aras stood in what used to be his living room, holding a mug that had somehow survived everything, staring at a wall that no longer existed. A soft breeze moved through the open space where something had violently introduced itself hours earlier. He took a sip, winced. Cold, he muttered, that feels appropriate. Behind him, she moved quietly, though quiet had started to mean something different since she'd entered his life. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of intention. He had gotten used to it faster than he expected, which was either impressive or deeply concerning. They will not return, she said. Aras nodded slowly. Good. I feel like I've hit my lifetime limit for unexpected visitors from beyond reality. She stepped beside him, looking out at the city as if memorizing it. The faint glow beneath her skin had dimmed to almost nothing now, a subtle trace rather than a constant presence. For the first time, she looked less like something passing through and more like someone staying. He noticed. That's new, he said, gesturing vaguely at her. You're less glowy. I am stabilizing, she replied. Is that good? Yes. Great, he said. Big fan of stability. Huge. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, just full. Aras shifted his weight, glancing around at the scattered remains of his apartment. So, just to recap, he began, ticking points off on his fingers. You crashed here, got hunted by very determined not friends, we survived, I had an emotional breakthrough under extreme pressure. Which I would like noted as highly inefficient timing, and now, what? You go back. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him, really looked, in that way that made him feel like she was seeing more than he said. You expect departure, she said. I expect something, he admitted. That's usually how these things go, right? Mysterious visitor leaves, human learns a valuable lesson, possibly cleans up debris. You have learned, she said. He let out a small breath, nodding. Yeah. Turns out ignoring everything doesn't fix it. Who knew? You knew, she corrected gently. You avoided. He smiled faintly. I'm starting to notice a pattern with you. You don't let things slide. It is inefficient, she replied. Of course it is, he said, shaking his head. Wouldn't want me to be comfortable. Another pause, but this one shifted. I can remain, she said. Aras blinked. Remain like for a while. Yes. He considered that, longer this time. The old instinct, the one that kept things distant, manageable, nudged at him, suggesting this was complicated, risky, probably a bad idea. But it didn't feel as convincing as it used to. And your people? He asked. My path is no longer aligned with theirs, she said simply. Sounds familiar, he murmured. He looked back out at the city, the normalcy of it all almost absurd after everything that had happened. People would wake up, complain about traffic, argue over small things, completely unaware of how close everything had come to unraveling. Okay, he said finally, turning back to her. You can stay. Her expression didn't change much, but something in her posture eased, like a calculation had resolved. But, he added, raising a finger, there are rules. She tilted her head. Define rules. No scanning my thoughts without permission, he said. I do not. Without permission, he repeated, a small pause. Accepted. And, he continued, you have to learn sarcasm properly. I refuse to be the only one making jokes in a crisis. That may reduce efficiency, she said. It will increase survival, he countered. For me, emotionally. Another pause. Accepted, she said. He nodded, satisfied. Good. We're making progress. For a moment, they just stood there, the aftermath of everything settling into something quieter, steadier. Not normal, definitely not normal, but possible. Aras took another sip of his cold tea, grimaced, then shrugged. You know, he said, a few days ago, my biggest problem was avoiding my own life. She looked at him, and now, she asked. He thought about it, then smiled, small but real. Now I'm actually in it. She studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod, as if confirming something important. Outside, the city continued, unaware. Inside, something new had begun, not sudden, not perfect, but real in a way that didn't need explanation. Aras glanced at the broken wall one last time, then back at her. First step, he said, setting the empty mug down, we fix this place. She followed his gaze. Your concern with structural repair persists. Consistency is key, he replied. A faint shift at the corner of her expression, almost a smile. And for once, Aras didn't feel the need to look away from what came next.